Thomas Edison on Religion and the Machine Age, also the bias toward the default. This is a quote from Thomas Edison in 1926. The laboratories of the colleges and universities, the research departments of the great industrial concerns, are places where the word of God is revealed and worshipped, even though some of the worshippers know not that they are uncovering it and bowing down before it. Or, Thomas Edison in 1930, locomotives are pretty well developed, but you wouldn't want to buy one and have it in your house, would you? Television is like that. So, a couple weeks ago, we took a vacation with some extended family to Fort Myers, Florida. It started with a little excitement, actually. We flew in a Delta A320 from DTW, which had to approach Fort Myers Airport twice because of an issue with the vehicle at first approach, which, quote, will require us to land at a higher than usual speed, as the pilot said. And then airport fire vehicles met us on the tarmac just in case. All was well, and people clapped, though. This is a photo of the trip back, actually, when I had a window seat. I did want to make one comment about flying, though. I don't know who started it, but there's been a bit of conversation on Twitter lately about why does everyone fly with the windows closed now? You have views available about which most of humanity could only dream. What's wrong with you? So, of course, I had my eye out for that on this trip, and indeed, most people kept the window shades closed. For our special high-speed landing, I was in a middle seat and asked the seatmate to open the window shade so I could watch. On the way home, I had a window seat. So what is wrong with people? If you're afraid of flying and want to try to forget that you're 30,000 feet above the ground, no judgment for me about that, what's wrong with everyone else, though? Maybe I'm wrong here, but I really think part of it is just the remarkable bias toward the default. The window shade was closed when they entered the aircraft. That's quite common. The flight crew does it or requests it, so they kept it closed. There's probably some implied peer pressure here too. Everyone else's window shade is closed, so I'll keep mine closed too. Most people are automatically comfortable when they're doing what everyone else is doing. By contrast, I take conscious and independent control of my surroundings, but that makes me weird. Most people in varying degrees just kind of float along. I recall another conversation recently about how intrusive the push notifications on phones have become. Well, you can almost always turn those off. Just about the first thing I do when I get a new phone is go into the settings and disable a whole bunch of stuff. Most people don't do that. That's why companies pay literally billions of dollars to make their web browser the default on such and such a phone. Think about that. It would take about 60 seconds to switch to a different default web browser, but the behavior is sufficiently uncommon to make being the default browser worth billions of dollars. But now about Thomas Edison. So we land in Fort Myers. We're staying at an Airbnb, actually, which I never do, and we're many hours yet until you're allowed to check in. A hotel would store your bags, but no such staff at an Airbnb. But we learned about a service called Bounce that lets you store luggage at the UPS store. Yes, really. So we end up in downtown Fort Myers, very close to the Edison and Ford winter estates. Yes, Thomas Edison, especially, and much later Henry Ford, they became friends, liked to spend the winters in Fort Myers, Florida. I had no idea. And here's a picture of me, Thomas Edison, and actually a banyan tree, especially around World War I. Part of the efforts here in Florida were to develop a domestic source of rubber, as nearly all of it was imported from Southeast Asia at the time, which was seen as not safe for the country. We toured the grounds, and aside from the fact that it was scorching hot, it was quite interesting, and they had no air conditioning. You think about that. In the bookshop, I picked up The Quotable Edison, edited by Michelle Warein Albion, basically just 250 pages of verified, bless them, no fake internet stuff, and organized quotations from Thomas Edison, with short introductions to each section. One might wonder how well you can understand a man just reading 250 pages of selected quotations from him, but I found it informative and fairly often applicable to the present world, and thought I'd share a few. So we'll start Thomas Edison on religion. So I have to start with this humorous one, though, from his diary in 1885 when he was about 38 years old. One of the first things I do when I reach heaven is to ascertain what flies are made for. And indeed, that was something I noticed in Florida, actually. The flies outside were much worse than they are in Michigan. Worth saying, though, the quotation that began this piece about God being worshipped in the research departments is rather inspiring. One can almost imagine putting that in the introduction to a Christian Science textbook. But be not deceived, Edison's personal beliefs were much more akin to deism. In his own time, he was accused of being an atheist, and in the present day, I've seen him called an agnostic, but neither seems right to me. He spoke repeatedly about a supreme intelligence out there responsible for the universe. The following was Edison in 1890, quote, "Most assuredly I do believe in God. Nature and science both affirm his existence, and where the layman believes, the man of science knows." It's interesting to quip that the layman believes, but the man of science knows. In 1900, Edison said, quote, "Why, After years of watching the processes of nature, I can no more doubt the existence of an intelligence that is running things than I can do the existence of myself. Sorry. Why, after years of watching the processes of nature, I can no more doubt the existence of an intelligence that is running things than I do the existence of myself. My sense is that Edison highly respected the moral code of Christianity, but, one, thought Christianity a simple answer to the universe, too simple to be true. For one, the universe is just too big. The idea that humanity is of any special concern to the Almighty he thought far-fetched. And two, he didn't particularly respect Christianity's preachers and institutions. He thought he saw corruption there, and also people presumptuously blubbering on about stuff when they didn't really know what happens after this life ends. Nobody does. We have no clear data upon that point. He was a man who trusted what you could investigate, and he thought most of what was coming out of the churches did not fall into that category. Here's Thomas Edison in 1910, around age 63. They say I am an atheist. Well, I am not, never have been, never said I was. Those people who called me one have not read what I said. I believe in a supreme intelligence, but I have grave doubts whether the good folk of the earth are going to be aroused from their graves to go to some beautiful shining place aloft. Don't see it, can't understand it, and neither can these ministers of fashionable churches. They don't even say what they think. Often they don't even think. It's all business with them. But he could be a good deal more positive about religion. Here, in 1926, he praises the Christian moral code. I believe Christianity will continue to produce the world's best leadership. The Christian nations are the wisest nations, and one proof of their wisdom is the acceptance of Christianity. Therefore, it seems to be the fact that I am a full subscriber to the moral code of Christ, as to all true moral codes. And, from the same year, there are sermons in all the beauties and wonders of the natural world around us. There is a mighty sermon in the thunderstorm, but one is mighty in the wildflower. The book of nature never lies, and in it may be found lessons concerning almost every fact of life, death, and perhaps immortality. That is another quotation that might tempt you toward inclusion in your Christian Science textbook, and I love the comment about the sermon in the wildflower is just as mighty as the sermon in the thunderstorm. And maybe it does belong there, but I would note, the book of nature never lies. Nature you can trust. Your local preacher, less reliable to Edison. And, from much earlier, in an 1877 letter to astronomer, among other things, Henry Draper, I will try to call at your place and see how you peek at the Almighty through a keyhole. I do like that. Is that what our science does? Peeks at the Almighty through a keyhole? So, on the whole, probably like a lot of early 20th century progressive intellectuals, you get the sense of a man who respected that the universe had some designer, surely it must, but that this designer didn't have a whole lot to do with running human affairs. Christian morality is great, but if you really want to know something, science is how we understand the world. But I will end with Edison's final words just before dying. Quote, "It's very beautiful over there." End quote. Per his physician, this was a comment about the view out the window, but a man can wonder. Then second major category here, Edison on the machine age. So if Edison is known for anything, it is probably the invention of the light bulb. Actually, I'm not going to share the quotations, but Edison seemed to genuinely believe that humanity learned to sleep because there's nothing to do in the dark. And now that we had electric lighting, we could learn not to need sleep. Truly and literally, and I do even think you detect some... he meant that, truly and literally. And I do even think you detect some blank slateism in Edison, which carries on into progressivism today. We can make ourselves whatever we want to be. He mentions in one place that his hair turned white around age 23. Well, he was a workaholic who slept as little as possible, and golly, one wonders if that might have contributed. But the overall obsession at the time seems to have been electricity. Electricity is going to change everything. The following was Edison in 1923. Electric labor-saving devices can be done, and soon, although I don't know how soon. But I'm not so sure that it will be a good thing. It will create much leisure, and it all depends upon what people will do with their idle hours. And in the same year, the time will come when full automatic machinery will be so largely introduced that the production will not require a man's working more than 4 hours a day. Electricity is going to automate many tasks, so we just won't have to work as much, by golly. The question then is what we're going to do now with all the time we have to lounge around. Many people thought that at the time. A few people say the same sort of thing today about AI, but not nearly as many, because I think we've learned that the amount of work to be done is infinite. And if, with machines, I can produce now what 10 men were needed for yesterday, those other men aren't just idle now, they're being just as productive somewhere else. It's just that total production and total consumption has increased. In fact, Edison comments that machines will raise the value of the employee because one man can be so productive, and this will finally make the employee master of his own destiny contra his employer. Here from 1920, Edison wrote, men are more efficient than they were 50 years ago. We have more machinery now, and someday all our work will be done by machinery. Then it will be more efficient still. The men will be paid high wages and will simply direct the machines. We'll even have automatic machinery to make the machines. Edison also made some amusing, and one might say insulting, comments about women. He also said American women were the most beautiful in the world because of crossbreeding. Specifically, he thought the minds of women were stunted severely because they spent all their time on menial housework. Here also, electricity would be a liberation. Children also then, since their intellects were the average of the intellects of mother and father, would be elevated. Edison said, electricity will develop woman to the point where she can think straight. Direct thought is not at present an attribute of femininity. In this, woman is now centuries, ages, even epochs behind man. That it is true is not her fault, but her misfortune, and the misfortune of the race. And from 1912, the housewife's work, in days to come, will amount to little more than superintendence, not of Nora, fresh from Ireland, or Gretchen, fresh from Germany, but of simplified electrical appliances. Nothing to do at home, he thought, but watch the machines. Also from 1912, and on a sort of different topic, I'd like to see every last school book thrown out of the schools, and they'll do it sometime. They'll do all the teaching by moving pictures. Every bit of it. That machine is especially for school. That machine is especially for schools. To be clear, Edison thought the former was a good thing. A lot of my writing recently, much of the thinking of Christian intellectuals recently, revolves around the fact that while technology has brought us much, it has also caused the loss of some things, and might even now be threatening how we understand our humanity. The latter there, the downsides of technology, are almost entirely absent from Edison's writing. Perhaps one exception is that he did understand that our tremendous technological power would also give us great powers to wage war. This from 1915. Science is going to make war a terrible thing, too terrible to contemplate. Pretty soon we can be mowing men down by the thousands, or even millions, almost by pressing a button. The slaughter will be so terrible that the machinery itself will virtually have to do the fighting. A man is only one man, after all. A machine can be easily as good as 20 men. I'm not sure Edison would have had an image of drones fighting drones, but that is one thing that comes to my mind when reading that. You get just a hint of concern in other places. The following, from 1885, was a comment on the possibility of electrical incubators for chicks. Modern parallels are obvious, he said. Just think, electricity employed to cheat a poor hen out of the pleasure of maternity. Machine-born chickens. What is home without a mother? But, clearly, he almost exclusively saw technology bringing about positive changes. And then a couple amusements for the end here. Thomas Edison was clearly one of those sorts, still everywhere around us, who thought learning needed to be immediately and practically useful, otherwise what is the point? He many times demeaned a college education, but not always. And he was mostly homeschooled by his mother after a teacher in Port Huron called him addled, and significantly self-taught. As a physicist myself, of course, I had to share the following quotation from 1923. My son is a physicist and a mathematician, and I am no mathematician. If his mathematics are not too professional, he can work with me. But if his mathematics shoot off in the Einstein direction, he'll be practically no use at all. Einstein is practically of no use at all. There we go. And finally, if your child is ever discouraged by mathematics, there is hope for us all. From 1898, when Edison was 51 years old, he said, I've never been able to remember how much 7 times 7 are. I always have to count that 7 times 6 is 42, and then add 7.